Hello, this is Brad Harvey. Today's question we're going to answer is, what are 3 key pieces of investment advice that you should ignore? This is something that we talk about all the time in our practice. We have a lot of people coming through the door with a lot of questions, and many times they have other pieces of advice that they've gotten from other professionals or neighbors, friends, family, and so on and so forth. And there are a couple of themes that have come out of that I'd like to discuss. The first thing is watching the market all the time. Many people say, oh yeah, I want to watch the market constantly, every day. What's oil doing? What are stocks doing? What are bonds doing? What's inflation doing? Who's in power? What's the election going to do? Well, actually watching this every day, all day, watching TV networks and trying to look at financial news every day, all day, if it's not part of your core business, it can actually be a lot of noise, and it can actually get in the way or interfere with the focus on your long-term goals. What happens in the market day to day is entertaining. I find it very interesting, and yes, I watch them constantly. However, this is my profession. If I was not in this profession, then watching the market all day, every day actually just causes you to rethink things, and it increases your emotion. Emotion can be the enemy when it comes to making investment decisions. So a single piece of advice that a lot of my clients and potential clients get is to watch the markets constantly, and quite frankly, to compare their performance to the S&P 500 or some other index like that. I think that can be dangerous because the S&P 500 doesn't necessarily get you to your goals. It's 100% large cap US stocks all the time. Do we want to have 100% of our portfolio in large cap core stocks in the US all the time? Probably not. But it's interfering with our focus on the long-term goal, which is to get retired, to become independently wealthy, to educate kids, to buy a second or third home, and so on and so on and so on. So, watching the markets every day, probably not the best advice. Number 2, only owning stocks and bonds. A lot of people get advice that, hey, I just want to own 60% stocks and 40% bonds and not worry about the rest. Well, there are a lot of other asset classes that don't necessarily fit neatly into those definitions. Maybe you have a closely held business. Maybe you want exposure to real estate. Maybe you want exposure to commodities or energy, things of that nature. Looking at it as a binary choice, probably not productive, because sticking just to stocks and bonds can be detrimental to meeting your long-term goals. We want to take a look at the entire board. We want to see all of the investment classes that we can invest in and make intelligent selections about how to get that mix for you. And the third piece of advice that we hear a lot, which I find kind of counterintuitive, is that fees and costs don't really matter as long as my performance is doing what it needs to be doing. This can be a little bit of a specious argument, and you hear it many times from very high fee or expensive advisors. Fees and costs are very important because the less you pay in fees and costs, the more money that goes in your pocket. That's not to say that we work for free, because we don't. We need to be paid for the services that are rendered. However, we want to know what those fees are. We want to know precisely what we're paying, how much, and what are we getting for those services. To the extent that we can minimize those costs, that means that your portfolio performance is going to be a little bit better, or we can get the same performance taking on less risk. This becomes very, very important to meeting your long-term goals. So, today's question that we answered was, what are 3 pieces of advice that I get from an investment standpoint that I probably shouldn't take? Thanks for visiting our channel. We hope you found the information valuable. If you want to see more videos about investing, please click to subscribe. If you have any questions you'd like for us to answer, please send us an email to harvey@riagroups.com. We would love your feedback.